I had intended doing a PDF, and then I thought no, and the reason I thought no was I had a really battering headache and my right eye felt as though somebody was sticking a hot iron in through the iris, and I thought no, I'm just too tired and my eyes are too strained, so I'll do a video. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing a video now of the process for, first of all, veneer needles or chisels. And if you own a machine that has a cutwork function, or no, sorry, if you have a machine and you know you can use their cutwork needles, then you can use any design made in any software that uses veneer chisel needles. Because they're not needles, they are miniature chisels. And as far as I know, they all have the same property. They all have the same angles. And I do know that the Pfaff veneer needles fit the Janome machines, and they are colour coded identically. So, and here in UK they're a lot cheaper than the Janome ones, which I didn't discover until after I had purchased the Janome needles. Okay, if you're going to use the chisels and you've got a machine that allows you to turn off your upper thread sensor, you have to locate where the sensor is. Now, on my machine, which is the 9900, it's under Common Settings. In other words, settings which will apply to both embroidery mode and sewing mode. And you can see at the top of my screen here, I've got the sewing mode and the embroidery mode. And then I've got them both together. So it's a common setting for both of these. And that's what you look for. Okay. Here is my common settings, and it's screen 3 of 4, upper thread sensor, and at the moment when I took this it was on. So I turned it off, and then when I had finished using the cutting needles, I turned it back on. And you can do that whilst you're in embroidery mode. Now, if you own one of the older machines, like the lovely old one I had, the old MC 10,000, you could fool that into stitching without thread. Now you might ask, why would you want to stitch without thread? Well, there are lots and lots of applications where it's handy to be able to prick through thin card with the sewing needle. And it's a darn sight faster on a sewing machine following an outline you've digitized than it is sitting there pricking it by hand with an awl. And the machine is more accurate than I am by hand. So I used to stick a thin piece of card between my upper tension plates, which sits inside the threading channel just below where the thread first enters that threading channel. So if you've got a 10,000 and you want to do cut work, you can still do it. You just stick a thin piece of card or an old credit card, but don't use the edge which has got the raised lettering. Use the others, another edge which has got no raised bits, and you just pop that in between your tension plates, and then you lower your foot, the tension plates close on that, and as far as it's concerned, there's a thread passing through. Okay, so let's just move on. Right. This is the first step in the veneer needle sequence. It stitches 2 passes around every shape that you've created. And the idea behind it is to stabilize your fabric. It's not to attach your fabric to the stabilizer. That's just a side effect. Now, to use the veneer needles, you have to have a heavily starched fabric and a stabilizer. And that's the bit most people don't understand. Now, this has been stiffened with gloop. Gloop is water-soluble stabilizer dissolved in water until it's the consistency of thin cream, known in UK as single cream. It's a sort of pearl grey colour, and if you dip your fingers into it, you feel they're a bit tacky. And you can put it in a spray bottle and you can spray your fabric, or you can paint it on with a paintbrush. It depends what your fabric is. Now this is a chintz and it's very close woven. It's a so-and-so to iron because it creases like there's no tomorrow, and it loses its beautiful glaze. I glooped it when the fabric was dry, and I dried it on a radiator. That's why you see the striping effect. Oops. I pressed it with an iron to get rid of the undulations, and it presses beautifully once it's been glooped. And then I attached my cutaway stabilizer using a temporary quilter's adhesive 505, but I'll be showing you that later on. And then I had sprayed the back of my stabilizer with a silicone lubricant for embroidery only. And that bit's important, and I don't know if it's available in hobby shops because I buy mine direct from an embroidery supply wholesaler. But it has the effect of preventing sticky back stabilizers or adhesive sprays gumming up your needle, gumming up your thread, and it also lubricates your needle and your thread. Right, so fabric and the tearaway stabilizer is hooped. Your machine then does 2 passes around each shape. Then you go and you locate your upper thread sensor and you turn it off. If you don't have an upper thread sensor, you slip the edge of your credit card or thin card between your tension plates. And if you're not sure where they are, most machines have a little door on the left hand side that you can open up to change the light bulb, and it will show you the take-up spring and a small little divot that goes through into your tension plates. Mine sits just below the top of the first threading channel. My thread comes along, it goes under the top leaf, which gets rid of any kinks supposedly, and then it starts to travel down a channel up under the take-up spring, up to the swan neck take-up arm, and then down behind the thread guide, behind the needle thread guide, and down to the needle. Well, it's that first channel that your tension plates sit in, so you pop it in there. Okay, so you go and you disable your thread sensor, or you pop your card in. Then if you've bought the Janome needles, you will have got one of these, or the plug-in kit rather, for the Cutwork. Now this can be bought on Amazon. They're dirt cheap. They come with sergers. They come with, did mine have it, a cover stitch? Can't remember, but I bought myself 3, I think it was, from Amazon, because I'm dreadful at mislaying small items like this, which are very important. Now, your chisel goes in flat edge against the back here, and it'll be a tight squeeze to begin with, and you push the chisel down in through the hole at the bottom, making certain that the flat side is against this edge here, and then you present that up to where your needle goes, and you push it up as high as it can possibly go, and you tighten up your needle clamp, and that is it. And then you take this off. You just slide it down the shaft of the needle. Now, this looks dreadful. I didn't realise it was so covered in fluff from the Cutwork. There is the needle inside the needle clamp, and that's the length. Now that never reaches your race. It's designed not to. There it is with the hoop on the machine, and you can see how high it is. It's up there, far higher than a needle. The needle normally sits down around here. And the first one in on this design was the black, and I think it always runs black first. And you start your machine. There's the first few cuts, just here. Now on some of them it may only make 1 or 2 cuts. On others it may go quite a long way. You can see it's made a cut up there in that one, cuts here, it's made cuts here. It does leave an area where no knives run, and it leaves a little bit of fabric attached here. Now one way of telling you have to change your needle, and it depends on your machine. On my machine, it just tells me colour change. Black one is the one that's in at present. The first colour was the stitching, and that was red. Second colour was black, and that was the first needle. Now it's telling me it wants the next cutting needle, which is colour coded blue. So it tells you what it wants by the colour thread thumb that shows up. And you will get exactly the same on the older machines that don't have the ability to turn off the thread sensor, so you've used a card. Okay, now you can see all 4 needles have done their work, and they've cut the shapes out. And one of the things that surfaced was, in future I need to alter the tacking distance from the cutting distance. Now here you can see the length of a standard embroidery needle. Because these needles now aren't needed anymore, I've gone and I have turned on my thread sensor. And I'm just removing these. There's a small bit attached at the base and a small bit attached at the top. And that's to stop it dropping down and getting down into your feed dogs or under your needle plate, because either one of them will cause a problem. Okay, when you have removed all the little bits that have been cut out, and ignore all this is flagging up to me that I didn't get my settings right in the Cutwork tool. But that's why you run test stitching, because that identifies things that you need to alter. The machine then does 2 passes of stitching to attach your water soluble to your upper fabric. Now you can see here, this really shows up how by not altering my distances I messed up. The 2 passes have gone in, and that's to attach this, and I just slid this underneath my hoop, something I tell everybody not to do, but past experience has shown me that taking my hoop off and sellotaping, and this stuff doesn't hold sellotape, sellotaping my water soluble to the back of my hoop doesn't put enough tension on it. And because I hadn't moved my original stabilizing stitching further in, the stitching that's designed to hold the stabilizer to the fabric has actually dropped down into the hole. So that's something I'm going to have to address. And the other thing it did, you can see all this mess, and it's almost impossible to pull it out. But that was because I didn't alter the settings, and you can see it here. Dreadful mess. I did try to pick that away, and I just could not get it out. When it has done its 2 rows of attaching the stabilizer to fabric, it then does a zigzag all the way around, and then it puts in your satin stitch cover. And then finally it does the embroidery that you asked it to do. Now this is no, that's still the first one. This is the second design, and I made the decision to do the embroidery first. Big mistake. And I'll show you why now. The results of not increasing the distance between the stabilizing run and the cutter, it just pulled the thread out completely. Not the fault of the cutters, the fault of the digitizer. Up here, just look at this mess. And that's because I asked it to cut through embroidery. Now, I wouldn't have got all that mess had I not done the embroidery first. You can see it. I can't blame the cutters. It does come down to the digitizer. Embroidery needs to be applied after the cutters. Okay, now I'm going on to Cutwork with scissors, and you can see here just a small selection of my embroidery scissors. Now, I tend to favour my lace scissors here. The only trouble is they've got such small finger holes. They make my hands ache. But what I love is they've got this small duckbill. I cannot cope with the large duckbill scissors. They're just too big and too clumsy. And I had a set and I gave them away. Now, this is a general purpose embroidery scissors. Great for snipping threads. Great for cutting round, applique, when you're pre-cutting. Not so good for doing cut work. These are excellent for cut work, but they make my hand ache. These are a pair of short, curved bladed embroidery scissors with bent handles. And they are great. The only trouble is they've got a needle point tip, and I kept catching my water soluble Solufleece 321, which is this. And then these beautiful pair of scissors, nicely balanced, nice long blade tapering almost to a needle point, but not quite. Then I've got my tearaway, which is what I attach to the back of my chintz for the veneer needles. Now this is 505 temporary adhesive, and you can use it on fabrics, doesn't stain, papers. I wouldn't be bothered using it for paper. You can buy cheaper paper glue, but it is great for fabrics, and I use gallons of it. And then this is a silicone lubricant spray, SL50. Now, I don't know if it's available through places like your local dealers or I don't know the American shops. We have a shop here called Hobbycraft. I don't know if they sell it. I buy it directly from an embroidery supplies wholesaler. And what you do with it is you spray the back of your stabilizer, and Floriani does a silicone impregnated. Actually, I think most of his stabilizers are silicone impregnated, but I spray the back of mine, and it prevents sticky back stabilizer or adhesive spray gumming up your needle, gumming up your threads. And the other side effect is it lubricates your threads and it lubricates your needle, which makes your thread less likely to shred. Okay. Then of course you need a hoop. And as you probably all know by now, I pretension my hoops. To do that, I put my whatever it is that I'm going to use as my stabilizer and my fabric in. I loosen off the thumb screw. When the fabrics are in, I tighten up the thumb screw, and I never go tighter. I was going to say that my thumb can go, but my thumb isn't very strong. So I take it as far as I can with my thumb, and then I give it one more twist with the screwdriver. And then I pop my hoop. Now, if I have to undo that last twist, I've over tightened the hoop. And I'm talking now getting it out of the hoop. I should be able to unpop my inner hoop without loosening that screw. When I've done that, I then re-hoop my fabric and my stabilizer, because now all the tension that I put on it by tightening that up when the fabric and the stabilizer was in there has now been released and has gone all the way around the hoop. And if it will pop out without undoing this, it will go back in without loosening it. That's pretensioning your hoop. There is my fabric. It's a linen look-alike. It's a beautiful piece of fabric, but I can't source it anymore. I have looked. I thought I found it the other day, and I ordered, I think it was 3 or 4 meters of it, only to discover it's not. But I'll use it for doing bits and bobs. I believe this one is actually not a synthetic, but what do they call it? Cellulose. I can't think of the term for it now. It'll come back to me when I don't need it. Okay, I put the hoop on the machine and I run the very first part of the design. And that's the part that delineates those areas that need to be removed. Now, when you watch the videos, you will see I made the mistake of trying to give myself a fail-safe zone where I had double outlines. Big mistake. They made my life more difficult. I'd also used an iron-on fusible, another big mistake. It was fine for the big areas, it would rip off lovely. But the small areas where you'd got a spider or something in the hole, I couldn't get rid of it. Now, with hindsight, I should have done 2 runs. Digitize my shape and then told it to repeat so that it's stitched exactly on top of the other one. That would have given me a much better barrier than the double row of stitching I gave myself 1 millimeter apart. that just made my life more difficult. So anyway, once this is stitched, you take it off the machine, you don't unhoop it, and you start trimming away what you don't want. Taking great care not to go through this backing. Right, there it is, trimmed away as neatly as I could do it. I'm not very good at trimming things in the hoop. I find the hoop gets right in the way. I used my sellotape to remove all the fluff, and that works beautifully. You can see I managed better here and here than I did in here. Too small a shape and the hoop was getting in my way. Then you put it back on the machine and it does the zigzag, which is meant to cover your raw edges. And make certain that your water soluble is firmly attached to this part and this part. So we've used up two of the colour changes. The original colour for doing the outline and delineating the areas you want to remove. The second colour, which does the zigzag. And then you do the next part, and that's putting the brides in. And that's your third colour. Now the reason you have the third colour is so as you can, after doing the zigzag, take the hoop off and clip back to your zigzag. I tried it, I couldn't get in. I'm right-handed and I needed to come at it from that direction and I couldn't. Anyways, the brides go in. And then your satin cover. Then all you have to do is remove any jump stitches on the back. Now I've disabled my scissors because I found every time they operated, because there was no tension on the top thread when it first starts stitching, the bally thing would come unthreaded. So now it's only allowed to cut thread on colour changes. So I have to remove all my ends, and then you trim your water soluble, and I put mine into a basin with 2 litres of very hot water. Now I haven't pressed this, and you can see the fabric is perfect. There's no wrinkles. Now this was rolled in a toweling tea towel, rolled up and then wrung, you know, like you would wring. You used to have to wring your washing at one time in your 2 hands, one hand going anti-clockwise, the other one going clockwise, until you got all the water out. That's what I do with my freestanding lace and my cutwork, like this. And this came out, no wrinkles, no creases, no nothing. Fabulous material. I wish I could find more of it. And I think that is it. Oh, you can see all the pokies. I'm going to use my fine-tipped soldering iron and just run around with that to burn off these wispy bits. Okay. Yep, that's it. So, I hope you try the Cutwork. I love Cutwork, and I've a whole pile of designs I want to do. I've got some beautiful Italian Cutwork designs, and I've been wanting to do them for so long it really does hurt. But the trouble is finding the time to do it all in, because I've also got my ordinary sewing, which needs desperately to be done. Winter is knocking on our door and I still haven't made my coats. So I'm going to say goodbye to you all now, and I hope this video helps you understand the steps that you take when you create your Cutwork designs. So I'll see you all in the next set of videos.